let's do some decimal rounding. So let's say, for example, we have the decimal 5.268. Let's say we want to round this to one decimal place. So how you would do that, you would look at the first decimal place. So it's 2, that is the first decimal place. You would then draw your partition line, okay? If the number after the partition line is 5 or more, you have to add 1 to the first decimal place. So all the partition line does is essentially split the number into 2, and everything on the left hand side of that partition line we want to keep, everything on the right hand side we want to discard. So the number right after the partition line will determine whether or not this number, the first decimal place, is going to go up by 1 or stay as it is. So if it's 5 or more, you have to increase it by 1. If it's less than 5, you keep it as it is. So we can see the number 6, so we have to add 1 to that 2, so we add 1 to it. So we'd get 5.3. So 5.268 to one decimal place is 5.3. So now let's round this to 2 decimal places. So we had 5.268. So now if you round it to 2 decimal places, you look at the second decimal place, because now we're rounding 2 decimal places. So you count 1, 2. So that's the second decimal place. Draw your partition line there. Okay. The number after the partition is 8. So that is more than 5. So we have to increase the 6 by 1. So you have to add 1 to that 6. So we'd get 5.27. So 5.268 to 2 decimal places is 5.27. Now let's say we had 5.2684. If we went around this to 3 decimal places, so you count the decimal places, so 1, 2, 3, that is the third decimal place. Draw your partition. The number after the partition is 4. So because that's less than 5, you want to keep the 8 as it is. Okay, because the number after the partition is less than 5, keep the third decimal place as it is. So we have 5.268. So 5.2684 to 3 decimal places is 5.268. Okay, so that is how you round decimals. Now another important skill that you need to know is how to draw decimals on a number line. So let's draw 5.268 on a number line. So we can see here that 5 on its own is a whole number. So we have 5 and we have this decimal, so this additional little bit on top of the 5. So we know this number is going to lie in between 5 and 6. So if we draw our number line, so we know this number here lies in between 5 and 6, which are 2 whole numbers. So if we divide the interval in between 5 and 6 into 10 divisions, that will give us the 1/10. So each division is going to represent a 1/10. So this is a 1/10, that is a 1/10, that is a 1/10, and so on. So we can see we have 5.268. So 2 is the 1/10. So this is the value for the 1/10. So the 2 there is here. So 5.2 would be there. So because it's got the extra little bit, the 0.068, we know it's going to lie in this interval here. Okay. So that interval is going to be 5.2 and 5.3. Okay. This is the midpoint here. So because we know this number lies on this interval, if we zoom into that, we'll get 5.2 and 5.3. So all we did here was just zoom into this section. Okay. So this is the midpoint. So the midpoint would be 5.25. Okay. If we divide this into 10 divisions again, so we'll get 2, 3, 4. So that is another 10 divisions. Each division this time is going to represent a 100th. Okay. In this section here, one division was a 1/10. We've now zoomed into 1/10 and we've divided that into 10. So that means each division here now is going to represent a 100th. So if we look at the number here, we can see we have 6 for the 100ths. So this number is going to be approximately here. So it's going to be in this interval. So this is 5.26. This is 5.27. So it's going to lie in this interval. So if we zoom into that interval this time, so if we zoom into this interval, we're going to have 5.26 and we're going to have 5.27. There's the midpoint, which is going to be 5.265. So if we now divide this into 10 equal divisions, so there's 10 equal divisions. Each division is going to represent a 1,000th, okay? Because we've now zoomed into a 100th, and then we've divided that into 10 divisions. So that means each division is going to represent a 1,000th. So you can see that we have 8 for the 1,000ths. So if we mark where that is, so we have 5.265 here, 5.266, 5.267, and we have 5.268 here. Okay, so this was the midpoint, that was the midpoint. So the number is there exactly. So we can see that this number, because it's in this interval here beyond the midpoint, to one decimal place it would be 5.3. So remember, if it's beyond the midpoint, we take the upper value, so that is to one decimal place. And because we then zoomed into that and got more of a precise location of the number, okay, we can see to two decimal places, because it's beyond this midpoint, it's going to be 5.27, so that is the upper value. Okay, so that is how you represent in decimal on a number line.